Hey guys, it's Kevin in my review for the latest new miniseries from Showtime, of course being The Good Lord Bird. So what The Good Lord Bird's essentially about is we center on the character of John Brown, but it's not focused entirely on him. In fact, we focus on a character named Onion, and Onion is someone that was a slave that was saved by John Brown, and he's now being forced to dress as a girl because Brown thought that his name was Henrietta, but it's really Henry and things like that. But basically, he is very close with John Brown. The two of them become very close allies, and he eventually becomes entangled in John Brown's efforts to abolish slavery and gets involved with Harper's Ferry and things like that, and basically is a look at if what John Brown did was as sincere as everyone says, if he really was this hero, or was he just a white savior, all that kind of stuff. So, The Good Lord Bird, I'm going to be honest, I didn't really know much going into this show. All I knew is that there was a new Showtime miniseries coming out. Ethan Hawke was in it, and it was apparently really good. And that was enough to really pique my interest. You guys know, these days, Showtime, I'm not that fond of. I feel like a lot of their shows, they just keep, like, milking forever, but this was a mini-series, and they tend to do pretty well with them, so I was really hoping that this could be a really well-done show. I checked it out, and I really enjoyed the show a lot. I feel like The Good Lord Bird is already a very overlooked mini-series that I really wish was getting a lot more attention than it really is, because I think the show really is something very special that we don't normally see, and there's a lot of reasons for that, but we're just getting to right now, starting off with the cast. And right off the bat, like I said, that's one of the things that really drew me to this series. You know, I looked at the I looked at all of the actors here, and, you know, this is a very talented cast for sure, and everyone, I think, really delivers very well. But, I mean, you came to watch the show for Ethan Hawke, and he very much delivers in every way possible. He goes all in on just how larger-than-life John Brown really is. John Brown, throughout the show, really only has two ways of speaking. He's either, like, whispering in this voice, or he's, like, screaming at the top of his lungs, and Hawke is just such a delight in this role. You get the sense of how passionate John Brown was, but you also get the sense of just how far he's willing to go to protect his cause. And sometimes it's done in a comedic fashion, but sometimes it's also done in a very sincere manner. And I think Hawke towed the line well between those two things. It never felt like he was, like, making a mockery out of John Brown. It just felt like he was very self-aware of who John Brown really was, and I really enjoyed that about his performance. I think he gave a very, very strong performance here for sure, and just again goes to show just how talented of an actor Hawke really is, and I just really liked his work here a lot. I think, again, he alone is enough for a reason to really watch this show. However, the absolute star of this entire show for me is really Joshua Caleb Johnson as the character of Onion, who really is our main character here, and I think he gives a really good performance. You know, this is someone who is very conflicted throughout the show, because on one hand, he does support John Brown, but he also has multiple opportunities where he could leave him and live a quieter life. And, you know, he very much is kind of like an outsider looking in throughout a lot of this show, and he very much is like the audience in that way, but he still feels like his own character, and I think that's because of how good Johnson is in this role. He makes this character feel real, almost like he was a real person. And I think he could have been a real person. You know, Onion's someone that very hypothetically could have been involved in this scenario, and he really do find yourself caring just as much about him as you do for John Brown, and a lot of that is due to Johnson's performance. And again, I really haven't seen much of him before, but I think he's very talented. I thought he got better and better as every episode went on, and I was just very impressed with his work here. This is a really well done child performance, and I thought the two of them worked so well together. They bounce off each other very nicely. They have a really interesting bond throughout the show that you're very much drawn into, and I think those two performances are really great. The rest of the cast, though, also gives, I think, some really good performances. Daveed Diggs, let's talk about him. He plays Frederick Douglass, and he does it in such an interesting way, because you see how Douglas is looked at as this, again, sort of like a larger-than-life figure, but he very much is, like, parodying this guy, and it's really fun to watch. I really enjoyed his performance throughout the show. I think he really, just similar to Hawke, went all in on just how eccentric Douglas really was, and I really did appreciate that about his performance overall. I thought that Hubert Du-Jour was also really good as the character of Bob, someone who is very much a sort of like an ally to Onion, someone that frequently accompanies him on a lot of missions, and I enjoyed him a lot. I thought he was definitely a very fun character throughout the show, and I thought Du-Jour's performance was really good. Beau Knapp is really great here, Nick Eversman, Eller, Coltrane, even some of the smaller performances, like Steve Zahn shows up for one episode as this character of Chase, this really vile character, and he's so good in that role. He really sinks his teeth into it well, and I really liked what he ended up doing. Zainab Jan, who played Harriet Tubman, I thought was really good. Even Maya Hawke, she's not in this much, but she still leaves an impact. I think every single actor in the show left some kind of impact. I think every single actor really stuck out in their own way, and I just really found myself to be very... I found myself really amazed by how good everyone was here. I think this is a very strong ensemble for sure, and I really liked the cast here. But now we got to get into the directing and the writing when it comes to the show, which the show is, of course, helmed by Mark Richard and Ethan Hawke, and I thought the way the show is directed was very interesting, because you read the subject matter of the show, and you think this would be a very dark and depressing series. You know, a lot of the time, things like this are portrayed in that way, and don't get me wrong, the show does not hold back to show just how dark things were, and, you know, just how ignorant and racist so many people are in this period of history. But it does it in a way where it almost is kind of funny. There's a lot of satire in the show, a lot more comedy than you really would expect. And the thing that's even more surprising is that it actually really works. The balance between the very cruel and dark tone with this comedy throughout it, it just did a really good job, I think, of keeping the viewer invested. I think they realized that if they made it too dark, it would alienate the viewer. So I think by adding this hint of comedy, which it's way more than a hint, it's frequently in there. I was laughing a lot during the show, way more than I really was expecting. I think is really well done. I enjoyed the directing a lot here. And again, it never feels like they're like parodying what's going on. They're trying to do it in a more lighthearted way than you really would expect. There's something that is very hopeful about this show. There's something that is very inspiring about this show, and I think they've portrayed that very well. I really enjoyed Hawke and Richard's directing throughout the show. It was very unexpected, but I think it really did work, and I found myself really buying into it fairly quickly. So I enjoyed the directing here a lot, but I think the writing is also really good to this show, because John Brown is someone that is hard to write for, especially now. The white savior cliche is something we've seen a lot in movies recently, and it's something that's been bothering a lot of people. And this show really does a good job of critiquing that, really unpacking who John Brown really is. Because this is someone that you read a story, and it does kind of sound that way, like, oh, this is a guy that saved slavery. But you really do see throughout the show how genuine his efforts really were. I mean, he is willing to kill. He is willing to slaughter anyone just so these slaves can be freed, just so, you know, he can have slavery abolished once and for all, just so he can save the people that he wants to, just so he can protect his cause. And I thought that story was done in a really well-handled manner. It's something that I think people are going to be worried about going into this show, but once you realize what they're trying to do with John Brown, where they're really trying to portray that this guy was actually legit with what he was doing. A lot of people tried to deny it, but the more people denied it, the more we really do see how much of a hero he really was, and I think that's something that really works well in the show. But I also think the idea to not have him in the main character was a very smart one, because Onion is someone that we all, I think, can very much relate to. He's someone that's kind of put in this situation, and he feels the same way a lot of us do. He's not convinced at first of how sincere John Brown really is. He's very conflicted, as I said, throughout the show. He's also in this really weird scenario. Early on, John Brown is told, when he wants to save Onion, that Onion's name is Henry. He's a boy, obviously, but Brown mishears it as Henrietta. So throughout the entirety of this show, he is wearing a dress, and people refer to Onion as a girl, and he's constantly with other women in this situation. And it's really funny. It works really well, and it's a really fun idea that I thought they always did a good job with in this show. I wasn't expecting for it to work as well as it did for me, but it really did. Also, the way that Onion has to, constantly be under this disguise of a girl. They do some really clever things with that. There's one episode especially involving Maya Hawke's character, and what they ended up doing, I just thought was so fucking funny with what they ended up doing there, and I really enjoyed that a lot. They really played around with that nicely, and I thought that really worked well. For Onion as a character, it only made me enjoy him more, and that was probably my favorite episode of the entire season. Not just because of that, but I thought it also did a really good job of getting us to understand Onion more, and I enjoyed that a lot for that character, for sure. But like I said, Onion as a character, I think, is also really well written, because you get the sense early on that he's deeply conflicted. He wants to believe that John Brown is sincere. He cares about Brown. There's a lot that Brown is doing for him, but he also understands that John Brown is a very controversial figure to a lot of people. A lot of people see him as just this maniac of sorts, because he kind of is. He's kind of crazy. He divulges into, these crazy monologues, and so you can see that there are many moments throughout the show where Onion has multiple opportunities to go on in his own life and not be with Brown, and you find yourself just as compelled to that story as you do with Brown. In fact, there are about 2 episodes of the show where you hardly see Brown at all, and it's a lot more focused on Onion, and I found those to be some of the best episodes of the show, because it really gets us a look into who Onion really is, and I thought they did a really good job with that overall. So I really enjoyed the writing for his character, and when we eventually get to the culmination of it all, I wasn't surprised. I was surprised with just how invested I really was, and how much I cared about what was going on in that situation. I think that, again, Onion is just a really well-written main character, and contrasting that with someone like John Brown, who just is so crazy in that way, but never feels one note. You really do get a chance to see what he wants to do, the way he wants to make an effort. His plans are insane, but the fact that he actually wants to do them, that's what people respect, because there's a lot of people who say they want to do things, but they don't have any real formulated plan, and John Brown actually did, and I think that's what people really do respect about him, and I think that's something that's covered very well in the show. So I thought all of that was very well handled, but then you also have characters like, say, Bob, who is someone that does want to join, John Brown, but he's never quite sure if he actually wants to. He supports John Brown, but he doesn't really know if he's fully into this, and I really enjoyed that character a lot, because I feel like we still see characters like that, who are hesitant to join the fight, because he's not really sure if Brown is going to support him all the way through, or if what Brown is doing is actually a good idea, and you can't really blame him for that either, and I think that's something else that they did very well. And yeah, I think that character was also very well written. Also, the way the show portrays slavery is very different than the way you would expect. It's at the forefront, but it's never the main focus of the show. The show's focus is not to showcase slavery. It's to show how these, slaves were, it's to show how they were safe, how they were in these different environments where they were dealing with slavery, but they also had opportunities to leave. And it's especially focused on the idea of being free. And I think that's what makes this show a lot more hopeful than others, because there are moments where things do get very rough. There's an episode where there's this very disgusting neighbor, and she says some disgusting things about Onion, and it's stuff that you very much do believe. believe, because people do still say things like that today. Maybe not exactly in the context of what she's saying, but things like this are still said today. And I think that's kind of what makes this show very timely, is that it's very much about putting a stop to things and supporting people that do actually want to, and not doing it because it's performative. That's something that we hear a lot about, even these days. And John Brown was never performative in that way. He was way too genuine to be. And I think that's something that is very well told throughout a lot of this show. So yeah, I just think the writing here is very well done. And like I said, it's also very clever with the way they decide to tell the story. For example, when we focus on Frederick Douglass, there are multiple moments where they'll have these like documentary-esque like monologues with him, and they're all really well handled. You would think that's maybe a little too anachronistic, but it's kind of similar to how when you watch a Tarantino film, things that happen in Tarantino films don't really make sense in terms of the time period. That's kind of the same thing with The Good Lord Bird, and I think it works just as well as it does in a Tarantino film, and I thought they handled that really well. So again, there is that element of satire, but it always feels genuine with what they're doing, and I think the writing is just really good there overall. The cinematography in the show, though, also is absolutely gorgeous. I mean, you really do feel like you're in the 1800s, you're in the Deep South, you're going through this story. You're really seeing what someone like Onion would go through, but also the battle sequences. I mean, this show is not afraid to get really bloody, especially one scene in episode 2. Holy shit, it was just absolutely incredible with the way they went about it. I mean, John Brown is such a badass as a character, and it was just so much fun to watch. But then when we get to the back half of the show and things start to get a lot more serious, I think that stuff was handled very well too, because they didn't hold back. They weren't afraid to go to some very dark places, and I think the cinematography is a big reason for that. So yeah, I enjoyed the cinematography a lot on this show. I thought the score here was very good too. It's definitely one that stuck with me throughout. And the editing, a lot of this show, some of the episodes are only like 46 minutes long, and I think it was very well paced. There wasn't a lot of moments in this show where I found myself bored or I wasn't as into what was going on. I will say I do think some of the episodes could have been a little bit longer, because it causes some episodes to feel just a tad bit rushed overall. But I think for the most part, this is a very well paced show. In terms of flaws with The Good Lord Bird, I'd really say my only real issue with this show is that I just don't feel like John Brown's family, meaning Owen Brown, John Brown Jr., and Salmon Brown, and as well as Jason Brown, I don't really feel like they were fully well-realized characters. And there is an event that happens in the penultimate episode, and it's very effective. But it would have been even more effective if we knew more about this character, and I just didn't really feel like we did. It always kind of felt like they were just kind of here, and I wish there was a little bit more focus on them. The show is very much focused on John Brown and Onion, which is fine. I don't have an issue with that. But I just felt like we didn't really get to know a lot about them, and I wish we could have, because I think it would have made things that much more effective overall. There's also a lot of narration in this show, and I do think it was necessary for the most part, but there were times where it felt like it was a little bit overbearing and we didn't really need it. And I get it was in the book, but a lot of the time it feels like they were describing what Onion was going through, and I felt it was pretty obvious what Onion was going through. I didn't really feel like we needed that told to us, and I felt like that kind of brought things down a bit. Sometimes it took me out of it, and I think they could have done some more stuff with that. I also do wish there was maybe just one more episode added to this show. I think that would have made things feel just a little bit better in terms of pacing, because it does feel like we get to the climax very quickly. In episode 4, we already are planning out what's going to happen at Harper's Ferry, and I feel like we needed just one more episode before we got there, and then things could have really moved well into motion. But other than that, The Good Lord Bird is a really well done miniseries. It has some excellent performances from Ethan Hawke and Joshua Caleb Johnson, respectively. It's surprisingly very funny with the way it goes about things. I really enjoyed its satire, but it always stays very sincere. It's trying to tell the life of John Brown. It's trying to show, you know, just how controversial he was, and I think it does a good job with that, but also showing just how much of a hero he was and being very inspiring to a lot of people. I think that's something else that people are going to enjoy a lot. And just overall, it's a very different kind of mini-series than we would normally get like this. And I think that's what really sticks out well about The Good Lord Bird. This is really trying to be something different. It's trying to be something special. And as a result, it's that much better because of it. I enjoyed this show a lot. I think this is already a very underlooked show. And I'm definitely going to give The Good Lord Bird overall a B+. But over, guys, to my review of The Good Lord Bird. Let me know what you guys saw this mini-series overall. Please check it out if you haven't. It's only 7 episodes long. It took me about 3 days to finish it. Very easy binge, for sure. Really do recommend doing it. I got a lot more TV stuff that I need to catch up on. Some of it I will be doing, like, individual reviews for, but I also plan on doing catch-up reviews for TV shows, because there's a lot of shit. There's a lot of shit to watch towards the end of the year, and I'm trying to get as much of it done as possible. I've really tried to do like top 10 lists in the past 2 years, and it just hasn't happened. So I'm really trying to discipline myself to make sure it happens this time around. But we'll see if it actually does. I hope it does. We'll see if it does. If it does, it does. Then if it doesn't, oh well. It's not like I was, you know, at least I've been consistent with that. So, you know, but either way, guys, in my review, The Good Lord Bird, let me know what you guys saw of this show overall, left your thoughts, and we'll see you guys in my next video, and we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.